Hello, this is your teacher, Professor Keener. I'd like to comment about the reading and writing we will be doing this semester in English 101B. First, it will be helpful as a reader to understand that authors write literature with intention and purpose. That is, writers know what they are doing and why. It's a myth to think that writers sit around and channel their unconscious, that ideas just come to them and they write these down. In reality, writers write a lot and are very conscious about their writing. Writers, even fiction writers, will do research, will read, keep notebooks or journals, sit down to write every day. Their job is to write, and they work hard at this. So how do we know that writers write intentionally and with purpose? You can look at writers' manuscripts and drafts. For example, look at this page from Jane Austen's novel, Persuasion. Even if you can't read the words, notice how she has crossed out words and whole sentences and added new words in. Writers read, revise, and edit their writing carefully. Writers tell us, sometimes humorously, that they write with intention, as this quote by Oscar Wilde suggests. I was working on the proof of one of my poems all the morning and took out a comma. In the afternoon, I put it back in again. Well, okay, so Wilde is exaggerating, but he does have a point. For instance, here's what James Thurber, another American humorist and writer, had to say about commas in his writing. Thurber argued with his editor over whether or not a comma belonged in one of his sentences. Quote, after dinner the gentleman retired to the drawing room for brandy and cigars. Thurber's editor wanted a comment after the word dinner, but Thurber refused, saying the gentlemen didn't need that much time to push back their chairs. Linda Paston, an American poet, says she writes about 20 drafts of each poem before it's done. In case you're not convinced, here are some more comments by writers about their craft of writing. Sue Grafton, a mystery novelist, says, I carry a notebook with me everywhere, but that's only the first step. Ideas are easy. It's the execution of ideas that really separates the sheep from the goats. Gabriel Garcia Marquez, winner of the Nobel Prize in Literature, explains that one of the most difficult things is his first paragraph. I've spent many months on a first paragraph, and once I get it, the rest just comes out very easily. Here's yet another comment, this by Fred Saberhagen, science fiction and fantasy writer. Quote, actually, ideas are everywhere. It's the paperwork, that is, sitting down and thinking them into a coherent story, trying to find the just right words that can and usually does get to be labor. Writers also have opinions about their own works. In this example, Flannery O'Connor tells us she wrote her short story, A Good Man is Hard to Find, which we will read later in the semester, in a very conscious way. She put a certain meaning into the story. As O'Connor says, quote, there are perhaps other ways than my own in which the story could be read, but none other by which it could have been written. So, if writers write purposely and intentionally, then what does this imply for how we should read literature? Well, for one, we can assume that everything on the page, every word, every sentence, every detail and punctuation mark is there for a reason. We call this assumption authorial intent. That is, we assume the author placed everything in the story for a certain reason. This also implies that we should read carefully and read closely, we being students and teachers of English literature. By the way, the image on this slide shows the annotated copy of Stephen King's novel The Shining, marked up by Stanley Kubrick, the director of the film version starring Jack Nicholson. In fact, English teachers really enjoy reading closely and trying to figure out what aspects of the story create certain feelings or suggest particular ideas. Like any reader, an English teacher has an affective response, that's one of feeling, as well as an intellectual response, one of analysis. Professor Foster, professor of English, said, quote, when an English teacher reads, he will accept the affective response level of the story, but a lot of his attention will be engaged by other elements of the novel. Where did that effect come from? Whom does this character resemble? Where have I seen this situation before? We might also consider why any reader would enjoy a work of literature. Here are some reasons we read. So as not to feel alone, to understand others' experiences, for realism, for escapism, and for so many other different reasons. Senator H.I. Hawakaya, who was also an English professor at San Francisco State University, said that reading gives us a way to expand our lives. Quote, "In a very real sense, people who have read good literature have lived more than people who cannot or will not read. It is not true that we have only one life to lead. If we can read, we can live as many more lives and as many kind of lives as we wish." In these final slides, let's take a moment to consider how we will write in this class. You may have written about literature in your previous English courses. Most commonly, students are asked to write a 5-paragraph essay, to do a close reading, or create a literary analysis. You might want to write like this in this class. However, now that you're in the second semester of a college-level writing class, you can be more ambitious. You can and should write more than 5 paragraphs in an essay. You may wish to connect the literature to your own life, as so many of us do when we read, or to other works you have read. You may want to write literature yourself by rethinking or reimagining a story, or write to the author or one of the characters. In this class, you'll have the opportunity to expand your horizons not only through reading, but also through writing. To sum up, in this class, you'll be rewarded for thinking outside the box, for reading with an open mind and an open heart, for taking some risks with your writing. And I hope very much that you will enjoy reading literature, enjoy writing about literature, and have fun.